Might as well get rolling.
Sounds good to me.
Will the Wizard, welcome to the Plenty of Love studio.
Oh, glad to be here, Pesche.
It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, this has been building up for sure. There's definitely some good conversation to get done.
Now, let's just take a moment to make sure everything's recording well, because I'd hate to sit here for an hour and chat with you, and then we didn't catch anything.
Yeah.
Test.
I mean, we've only done that about 2 million times.
2 million
so,
times.
So for the one we're actually recording the podcast, Will.
Well, it's lucky that we'll never run out of interesting conversation.
I hope not. Hasn't happened yet.
Hasn't happened yet. Let's hope this isn't the first time.
Yeah.
But you broke your arm last week.
Yes.
Or 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
That's bad news.
Lessons like this, like situations like this, always come with a valuable lesson with them, but they're just not always pleasant to learn.
Yeah.
And so for me, the trick has been focusing on the method with which the lesson is delivered. And if I can make it, bearable, then I come away with all of the good shit from it without having the worst time. But it takes a lot of energy to maintain a kind of perspective like that. So.
Do you think you're cursed with soccer? This happened, your first soccer game back. After being out from soccer for 2 years with a broken leg. First game back, break your arm.
Yeah.
Is the universe trying to tell you something?
It's a bit heartbreaking. I'm thinking that the message is probably if I decide to jump in again and play soccer, I should probably do a bit of preparation and not sit around on a couch for a good 2 years.
Or play the under-12s.
Yeah, warm up. Like, you don't just throw yourself in the deep end, right? You gotta take it in stages. But no, there is definitely a part of me that's thinking perhaps it's a bit of like a how much more do you want, mate? Like hint, hint, nudge, 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 kick. Get the picture. I don't know. I think if I can find something to replace it that gives me the same level of satisfaction, I'll never look back. But until then, it's like an ex-girlfriend who's always keen.
Yeah.
You know it's a bad idea, but had some good times together.
Oh my god. So what's the next sport? What are you going to move on to now?
Oh, I'm thinking rock climbing. I think I just got to get really... It was my first sport. And, climbing was. My dad used to have to pull me out of the tree kind of fairly regularly. We had a paper tree in our front yard. And from the age of about 2.5, I used to climb it. And the fire brigade got called twice, because it's like a 30-meter tree. Whoa. And there'd just be this like toddler hanging from the tops of it. None of the adults could get up there because the branches were too thin. And so like the neighbours would be freaking out, calling the fire brigade and stuff, like, your child's in the tree again. Like, after a while, it just became like they just knock on the door and just, Dad, okay Ross, your kid's doing it again, you want to do the thing.
Well, I'd probably trust a child up on a tree like that more than a human. As babies, we're born with that grip reflex, where if you dangle a baby and you give them your finger to hold on to, they'll hold on with all their might, with everything they have. Probably a reflex from, when we were, still being born in trees as monkeys. You want to be able to grab onto anything, instead of falling out of a tree. So.
Absolutely, man. Totally agree. And like the way that infants check their environment as well. Like they're not very good at, or they don't have a lot of physical strength, so their form for everything is perfect. Like under the age of 2, if you watch a kid lift anything, they have almost the exact perfect lifting form where they bend their knees with their back straight and they're like, and then they get strong enough where their muscles, can just deal with it without having to deal with the perfect. So they just bend it, and people just lean over and stuff, and they totally bend that form until they go something that's at the max of their strength.
Yeah.
But
toddler's squat is something to behold.
Oh yeah, like if you want to learn how to squat, just spend some time watching a toddler. Like, they'll teach you a thing.
Yeah.
And that kind of translates to when you I don't know. Whenever I see kids, they're often like testing each step before they kind of put their weight on it and stuff. And like that's how I was as a kid. You wouldn't commit to something until you're pretty sure. Yeah. Controlled caution, I think it is. And like, there's no fear involved yet. Like something I find super interesting is that it's widely agreed by current behavioral scientists that humans are born without fear. Babies have no fear, and it's something that we learn as we grow older. And think that, like, when you watch a child learning, you can see the fearlessness in it. You know, they don't even know what failure is yet, so they're just like totally immerse themselves in whatever they're doing. It's something I wish I could apply to myself, like, without having to focus on it, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's funny how many layers are put onto us by our society and by our parents, and it kills me every time at a park or at the playground or something, and I see parents, you know, running after their kids saying, "Be careful of this, be careful of that, don't climb that," and putting all this fear into a child who is just, you know, has like such a lust for exploration and learning, and and we fill them with fear.
Oh, absolutely. And like something that I used to the first time I broke my leg and couldn't play soccer, I decided I would start a coaching clinic, and that would be my way of, you know, playing without playing. I used to coach under 10s and over 10s, and I would teach the kids how to fall over, because a lot of the ones who had been like wrapped in cotton wool and just like really protected by their parents from their own physical selves, kind of thing, like, you know, kids who've been playing their whole lives, they just tumble and they get up and they keep going, and it's no thing, you know, like they don't even realize they've fallen over. And then if kids are the kind that when they fall over, if they cry, they get held by their mum or whatever, they're kind of like, they tend to splat. It's like, you know, they don't roll with the impact, and they just kadoosh. And that was exactly how I broke my arm. I hadn't fallen over in like 2 years. I'm out of practice.
Yeah, well, that's the first thing you learn when you go to a jiu-jitsu class, break fall, and how to fall and roll, and so you're not just
yeah, it's parkour.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to jump off a 2-story building and just like, I'm, you know, and then once you get that understanding that kids can go in hard without fear of being hurt, as long as they manage how they fall, it's fine.
Kids are so malleable as well.
Well, it applies to life.
Soft bones, soft everything. Like, you probably drop a kid and not going to hurt it too bad.
And they're light too, you know. It's like if you drop a mouse down a well, it's probably land and run away. If you drop a horse down a well, probably not gonna go so well. They're nice and springy, flexy, they bounce.
Let's not put that to test.
Most of them.
So, what are you going to be doing with your time? Obviously not working over these next 2 months. When people ask you what you do and you don't want to say packing shelves at Coles, what do you tell them? Because you have a varied array of interest and, you know, a wide breadth of things that you're interested in and knowledgeable about.
Well, that's basically it. Like, there's a quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson that I heard recently that I really enjoyed, and it was like, my life ethos has been to learn something new every day and to lessen the suffering of other people.
I like that.
It's like, you'd be amazed at how far you can go with just those two beliefs. And it's kind of like that. It's learn something, and I find I learn best when I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And so it's also, I'm the sort of person who usually has too much energy. And if I have ways of outletting that productively, I hit my max, like, you know, kind of efficiency. Otherwise, it kind of just starts to bounce around within myself and kind of spirals into this weird, you know, whatever. And I feel like I use a lot of it in my own head. But I think at the moment, the next 2 months, the idea is to sort out some source of income, and then I got time. You know, so I can do it. I think I might head up to Byron and go see the sun.
Come see us.
Yeah, pretty much. I try and get there every winter, and it's about time. So this is, you know, got some time off work.
Well, I'm glad you're getting out and about. I'd hate you to turn into Bart Simpson when he, at the start of summer, falls out of the treehouse and breaks his arm and goes all funny, looking through his telescope into the neighbour's yard. That's not you, which is good.
Well, I've done it before. That's definitely been me. Like, there's, Naif, interestingly enough, doing vipassana at the moment. He started his first day of the vipassana at the same day I broke my arm. And so I'm pretty sure that we're spiritually going through a very similar journey. Like 3 or 4 days of like, holy fuck, how am I going to get through this? And then like, actually I'm starting to see it. I'm starting to see the benefits of this, and creating, like, I guess, being put in a space that you're stuck in. And then it's up to you to do what you can with that space to make it livable, you know? Like, if you're stuck in a shack, you don't have to leave it a shack. You can put posts on the walls and shit, you know? Try and make it comfy somehow. So that's what I've been doing, and there's a joy in that sometimes. but
Yeah, it's interesting.
There's the down moments too. They come with both, you know.
I'm sure there is. Vipassana itself is, you know, a massive test. And, you know, our friend Nathan and my girlfriend Vanessa are both there at the moment.
Oh,
I catch myself at moments thinking, you know, through the day that they're sitting there right now, eyes closed, probably thinking, you know, counting down the minutes until they get to leave. But it's one of those things, yeah, like, at first, there's all this, like, wanting to escape, wanting, you know, to deny the pain of sitting for a long time, the pain of being bored. But then you realize you're going to be stuck with this for another, you know, 8-9 days, that you just have to deal with it. And then you go into some cool places where you decide to sit with the boredom and, like, see what you can find through that. And, yeah, I suppose it's, like, similar with pain or any difficult thing that happens. Once you get over the resistance stage, there's some gems in there.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I have been kind of, I don't know, I thought about it pretty heavily when I broke my leg. And because my way of dealing with my mental space, often if it got too much, was to just shift all that energy into a physical space and just lose myself in the exertion of my body. And then I would just do so much work that, you know, I come back and that energy's like at a level where I can be in my headspace comfortably because it's controllable. And then when I broke my leg, I found I couldn't escape anymore. I just had to be in this mental space because, like, I was trying to actively avoid being in my physical space because it was so fucking painful. So then I had to learn to train and like tame my own brain, and that's basically what Vipassana seems like to me. Like learning to just be stuck with yourself and with your brain, and just learning to get it under control, and like spending enough time with it that you can work out how to make it do what you want it to do, you know, rather than just doing everything it does.
Do you ever have any interest in doing a Vipassana or some kind of meditation course?
Most definitely, and for a long time I was quite, I guess, a little bit hesitant about it because I was a bit worried about how I would cope, I guess. But with a little bit of reflection, it's like I feel I've sort of done Vipassana maybe a couple of times in my own version. Like when I broke my leg, I spent 2 months in a room, just in a bed. Like, you know, sometimes went 4 or 5 days without chatting to anyone. Like, so it's like that's probably a similar level of intensity that I was kind of forced into, and then managed to deal with that relatively well and still come out of it with a lot of good stuff. Like, it was painful as fuck, but like on the other side there was a whole bunch of good shit. If I'm willingly and like actively making a choice to put myself in that situation, then I think it'll change the feel of it a lot, and I'll be able to compare the two, but it'll be like an awesome way of getting injured, you know? Like a really cool, mindful, where I get all the benefits of it with none of the fucking detriments. Like, don't have to break myself to like learn something, you know?
It's like, yeah, that's a funny advertisement. Like a broken leg without the broken leg.
Yeah,
like the introspection of a broken leg.
Without the, you know, fucking pain of having to deal with it all. And as well, like my mental space, like my head space, I guess, is a very big one. Like there's a lot to explore, and there's a lot of different corners, and a lot of different like moods, I guess, that all live in there if you imagine it like a landscape. And so it's like if you're stuck in a corner of that landscape, it's a bit less pleasant to be in. You know, it's about navigating your way into the better ways, the better aspects of it. And each time you learn that, you learn the lay of the land a little more and a little easier. And you know, sometimes you get lost and you find yourself in that space, but learning how to get out and how to see cool shit along the way, that's always a super valuable skill.
What I really love about you, Will, is how you have, on one hand, you know, you have that perspective of scientific materialist, and you like to really break things down in a scientific way, but you also have such an interest and respect and kind of a knowledge on the esoteric and the more unknown parts and spiritual things as well. Where do you consider yourself on that spectrum between, you know, spiritualism and science?
Well, I've always been super fascinated by the idea of like spectrums and balance, and so like a spectrum can be pushed further down on either end, and the middle will readjust to wherever, you know, like if you push it down on one end, the middle's also moving along, and so like if like I think humans often try and find themselves in a place of balance. You know, they try and want to be as close to the middle of that spectrum as they can. And there are definitely times to push yourself in either direction, but we feel best in the middle. And so I really love like that meeting point between, say, like super crude and really like beautiful, like, or something very like stupid but at the same time really clever. You know, and like that, those are my favorite, when there's a clear and sharp contrast in something on both sides, and neither of them like contradict each other. And so for me, if you push one end of the spectrum down, you're also increasing the opposite end of it. Like, start kind of, you know, what's the word? Like, passively. Like, so if I sit as closely as I can in the middle of these two worlds, and then sometimes push one end further, if I push my spiritual understanding a little further, that's deepening my scientific understanding. And vice versa, you know, they all tie into one another. So I kind of really enjoy trying to be in the middle and push each end further with everything that I can expose myself to, I suppose. And also I think, like, I put heaps of sway in science because it fucking works. Yeah. Like, planes fly. Like, if you took all the science out of getting into a plane, I wouldn't get on one. Yeah. If you had a random guy who was like, get in this, it's going to get really high up, and then come back down and you're going to be okay, I'd be like, that's metal. No. But I trust people, you know. Yeah. People are pretty fucking clever. They've worked the shit out. Like, they worked it out mathematically, and it seems to follow through. So, like, I have a bit of faith. Like, I think you have to be quite stupid to not put trust in the scientific method when you look at what it's done for us. But equally, science cannot measure anything subjective. So anything that's up to you to interpret, you know, how you like, it's immeasurable. And it's like, that's all anybody ever has. So like, we can't be too scientific, guys. We got to turn it back a little bit. Like, everyone has a different interpretation of something. And so I think I've always been very linguistical minded, and words are totally like not measurable at all. Like, there's a different meaning for every word for everybody, you know. And so it's like we're really just trying to like throw similar things at each other and hope we both pick up the same stuff. But you know, science is the total trying to get away from that. But neither of them like are wrong. They exist kind of side by side, I think. And so, you know, I like to kind of to understand as much about both as I can, and also weed the bullshit from the true shit as well. Because I guarantee you that there's a whole bunch of shit in science that's still wrong that we like believe is right, and it's just
science is just our best guess yet.
It's what our current understanding of things are, but it's constantly improving. Like, we're just using the scientific method, which is, you know, ways of testing things that we can prove that they're consistent and reliable, you know. And then on the flip side, you've got like words, which are just super, don't really, you know, it's a very loose science. There's no correct way to write a book. Like, every book is different, and they're all cool. Yeah, super interesting.
As we were talking about when we drove to Yanaki a couple of weeks ago, it's also the extrapolation of science, the human interpretation of raw scientific data, which is a big problem in science.
Yeah, for sure.
And about human meaning and human emotion, giving science a completely different message to what the data actually speaks about.
And yeah, when you take so I studied I studied half a degree or most of one in science law, and law is completely subjective. Like, the more you learn about it, the more you learn that the truth is whoever can argue their point better. And then science is, the total opposite for that, and it's all about trying to measure yourself as much as possible. But if you can spin the results of that and tell people, all right, this is what this means, and withdraw meaning from a set of occurrences, that's where there's a saying that goes that if you wish your message to hit the target, make adjustment for the wind. And that's where the wind comes in a lot. Like, people can totally twist things to just like, all right, so here's some findings. Oh, does that mean we can get this meaning out of it? Well, maybe if we stretch the fuck out of it and then push it, and often people will accept it before it's tested. There is a bit of a problem in the scientific community at the moment with peer reviewing, you know. A lot of the stuff is being hard to reproduce, independently. And so...
And that's the whole point of science, right? Is to be able to like list a set of instructions or steps that anyone can do and arrive at the same result every time. And that is basically the peer reviewing process and checking for holes in the method or...
Absolutely.
And so what you're saying is that...
So to come... sorry, finish.
Well, yeah, what you're saying is people find it hard to replicate, you know...
The same results, you know?
Yeah.
And it's a very good way of what putting a scientific method is. So you're taking a hypothesis, which is like a guess or your the way you think the world might be, and then you think about a way to test that, so you can prove it, and you use the most reliable things you can. So like the laws of physics are usually pretty reliable. You know, you can kind of count on the mechanical properties of the universe to behave in the way they do. Doesn't confuse us too much. Yeah. But, so yeah, you're trying to basically discover the truth of something, and then in a way that anybody else can. And then it's undeniable, they all reach the same conclusion. And that's why I put faith in science over, say, religion. Because if this society was wiped out tomorrow, and we had to start again, eventually I'm sure people could rediscover the properties of aerodynamics and create planes again in the future. You know, I don't think they would come to the same understandings about God and religion and that kind of thing. I think it'd be same kind of like truths just tangled up in different cultures, you know.
Well, that's the interesting thing about mythology also, is it's like, is that an innate part of being or of the human experience? And, you know, if it were to rise again, would the same myths come up, like the same science would come up? Or is myth a completely subjective thing, and, you know, not reproducible?
Well, I think a lot of myths is reproducible, but you have to get a lot further into it. Like, a lot of the myths are the same thing at their heart. You just have to go into the center of them. Like, instead of reading the words, you've got to read between the words and find the meaning of what they're trying to say to you. And like, if you start doing that with a whole lot of mythologies, a whole lot of religions as well, they're essentially getting at the same things, but they use different stories to get to that point. And if you, like, a lot of these beliefs come from a time that was pre-printing press. And so when 99% of the people that you know can't read, the only way they get new words is from speaking to people. Now, if you have no, like, if your only form of transport is horse, if you're lucky enough to own one and afford one, otherwise it's walking, you're probably not going to meet that many new people with that many new words. And so to explain a tricky concept to someone, you're going to have to get real clever about how you do it. So you're talking parables, you know, like there was a man, he was sad, he did a thing, some other people clapped, happy story. You get what I'm saying? Like be nice to strangers. Because it was language which is not developed enough to communicate some of those things.
Chinese whispers.
Yeah. And so if you're trying to, like, if you look at the morals of a lot of the stories across all religions, they're all trying to say the same thing. Like, don't be a dick to people. Like, for society to function, we need to behave in a certain way. You know, and if you can come up with consequences of that seem bigger than the moment, then you make people more likely to behave in that way. I think the best way is just convincing people that it's in their own interest. But sometimes it takes a little bit of... it takes a certain mind to be able to understand and believe that, I think. Like, there's a rule on morals by, I think it wasn't Immanuel Kant, I don't think. Oh, it might have been, but it was a philosopher who came up with, I think it was a Scottish guy who came up with a like set of rules as for how to remain moral, and like they're not perfect, but one of them was like, if you were in a system and you find a way of exploiting that system that benefits you, if everybody in that system was to use that same exploitation, would the system still work? And if the answer is no, then it's not a moral act. And so it's like, if you're playing a game and you find a way to cheat, and you get better at the game, like, that's not moral to do. If everybody would do that, then the game wouldn't work anymore. And so it's just a nice way.
Where does dumpster diving line up on that continuum?
Well, if everybody dumpster dived, what would happen in society?
Well,
I think it would get better. in a lot of ways.
That's what the guys at Woolies thought today when they chased us out of the shop.
Well, you need to teach them some philosophy, Pesche, because their morals are a little twisted right now.
I'm going to bring you back with me next time.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell them a thing or two. Another one of these rules is that the ability to work out what is moral lies within each individual person. And that's something that I really, really like, because in my opinion, if anybody else is telling you what is right or wrong for you, that's a great mark of somebody who does not respect your own path, I guess. You know, they're trying to say, this is mine and this is how you should walk. And I think everybody comes from a different place. We should all pick our own way of walking through life, you know. Something I just chatting before about, I think it was egos, and there was a thought that cropped into my mind about how the desire to change the world is something that separates humans from other animals, from my own observation. Like this concept of ego and this understanding that, like, you know, we want to make a difference by being here. Like, I don't know, I sometimes just sit and watch my cat at home, and the way he sits in the sun, just fucking loving life. He's pretty chill with things. Like, he has no problem being a cat. He's just comfortable and content doing that. And for some reason, I don't have that being a human. Like, I've got this drive to... I can't just sit in the sun and just feel good about shit, you know? It's like, it's this masculine energy of, like, I gotta, you know, do something with my life. Like, I'm wasting my time otherwise. And the thing that I found very confronting, with the not being able to switch between the physical space and the mental space, and, like, having that whole, you know, learning to tame my own brain and that kind of stuff. It really felt like that part of me that makes me less animalistic and more human, that weird driving thing that seems to just make us a bit different from all the other species we seem to come across on this planet, was really getting reined in. And, like, a big part of, like, the ways that I looked at the world, I realized had been kind of pushed on me and, like, expected of me, and I kind of bought into them without, like, believing it. Whereas now I kind of think much more, like, I strive to be like ego, and just like the cat, and just, you know, sit in the sun. Like, that's the cat's name. Ego. So it makes things a little confusing. But like, human being, not human doing. Like, it's taken me a little while to, and it's so weird how hard that is. Like, every other animal seems to just be able to be content with just things the way they are, you know, whereas it's such a struggle for so many people to just appreciate things. Like, is that from fear, do you think?
I wonder if it's a reflection of our society more, a goal-driven society, compared to, you know, maybe a society of scarcity in which we live in now, where work is necessary to survive, bills are necessary to survive. You know, in a time, our gods are all about fear and scarcity. So fear is part of that.
On that though, this is manufactured scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
We live,
Absolutely.
There's more abundance in the world than ever before.
Absolutely,
and the idea of scarcity is something that is perpetuated by people who are trying to sell you more shit. Because that's how it all ticks.
I think if you do get more into an abundant attitude like hunter-gatherers would have had, where the land has, unless you're, you know, in some kind of alpine areas where there's some, like, granted, some places might have been more difficult, and maybe that's why you see more development and technology in colder areas. But say you're living in the tropics, you walk around, you've got a banana tree here, you find some pineapples there, climb up the tree, get some coconuts, there's plenty of fish in the sea. You know, it's a happy life, and you have that feeling that you can lie around in the sun, have a sleep, you know, wrestle with your friends, and there's still going to be food there at the end of the day. But I think the way we've been grown up is, if you don't do something, shit's going to be bad. You're not going to have things. And I think that gives us that, it's that internal thing that, stops us from being able to let go and enjoy being.
Yeah, it's very well worded as well. There's this quote from one of my favorite books where he says, stop for a moment and imagine the universe just beautiful and perfect in every single aspect. Now be sure of one thing. Whatever created the universe did a damn better job of it than you just did. And it's like this idea that, like, we're kind of like, I think humans have this inbuilt drive, or at least all the ones that I've ever hung out with and met, have this like kind of desire to improve the conditions around them, to make them more comfortable and more, just constantly be laying better foundations for the kids after us, you know, for the people who inherit what we've done with our time. And this idea of fear kind of comes in, and like, unless you do something to make it better, people are going to be angry at you for what you've done with your life, and then it's going to be considered a failure. Whereas if we were hanging out just, you know, in the tropics eating bananas, I don't think there's many ways we could make society better. Like, I feel like now there's a lot of work to do, you know. Like,
well, you know, think to the feeling that you get when you're at Confess, say, or Burning Seed, or, you know, any of the festivals you know, that you go to. I mean, for me personally, I know that feeling is far less prevalent there when things are just good wherever you are. You're always in the right place when you're in a space like that, because there is that buzzing abundance around, and there is everything you could ever want really on tap. You know, there's great music, there's friends to meet, there's always something stimulating going on.
Absolutely. I find it super cool how the more primal most people get, like the more they let go of all of the culture and technology that we've kind of like continuously like teeter-tot. It's like the craziest game of Jenga. Yeah. That's what society is right now. And it's so fucking tall. And nobody's sure if we could keep building up. It's like, I don't know, this is pretty sketchy, guys. It's wobbly as shit. But we're just still going, you know? It's giant, and people are like, is it my turn to put down a block? Like, oh! It's like, when we first started playing Jenga, it was like, fucking, you just throw shit on top, you know? There's no pressure. And so I find when people are just like getting naked, dancing under the moon, and like, you know, there's fire around, hitting a drum or some shit, like getting really backwards with like I'm sure there would be certain colonists back like a couple of 100 years ago or something who would like spit through their teeth at that kind of like savage behavior.
Yeah, but you know, there were people who decided to run away and join indigenous tribes when conquerors came. And
in the USA, it only went that way. So the people who joined the indigenous tribes left. Nobody from the indigenous tribes went and joined the Western way of living. And that's something that I find super interesting, you know? It's like, the more people are exposed, I think the more simple people can make their life, and the more just like easy to understand and deal with, the more peaceful people are.
What I think is important to us is that we feel like we have influence over the world around us, and that leads into, or it ties into what we were saying before.
Agency, definitely.
And when you're in an environment like this, it's hard to see what impact, you know, your energy is having on the world. When you go to work and you stack shelves or you serve a bunch of people, you can't see a tangible effect, a positive effect that's happening on your community or yourself. Where when you're in more of a communal environment, where you're at a festival and your actions directly affect the people around you, how much work you put into your campsite directly affects how comfortable you're going to be there. You know, here we just come to work, we pay some bills. It's like, can't see really the effect of what we're doing, and having that that feeling that we do have influence and that our actions do mean something, I think is a very empowering thing for us as humans.
Absolutely. And the way that you brought that up and got onto it is just really well phrased, and it kind of ties into this idea I have, like agency and willpower, you know. It's like there's something magical about any living thing. Like a table doesn't have a lot of agency. It can't control its environment, and it doesn't have an ability to stamp its desire on the space around it. And that's something that separates living things from non-living things. There's an ability to influence our surroundings and our environment, and then a desire to make them more likable for us to be in. And so if we can't see that we're doing that, definitely, like for me personally, I start to kind of like feel like a table, you know. I start to feel like an object. I start to feel like I'm being used as an object and not as a living, breathing creature with my own desires and thoughts. And I think that ties into like volunteering, and how people who volunteer usually have the highest job satisfaction of any job, and it's because they're choosing to give their time in a way that they can see the benefits from. And I think in a society like today, when everything's so fucking crazy and complicated, and there's like steel chariots everywhere that like explode shit from the ground and like fly us around, and you know, like little boxes in our pocket that tell us what the sky is doing on the other side of the world, and weird shit like that. It's kind of hard to work out where we fit.
Through space where we can see our families and
in
Europe face to face on a screen.
Yeah, there's a tiny box that has my friends' voices in it, all of them, every friend's voice. And it can just mimic them perfectly. Like, that's weird, you know. And it's like, compared to that, how do I make a difference? Like, I can definitely see how in the complicated and overwhelming kind of atmospheres and environments we're in, it makes it a little bit harder to feel like we're the masters of that environment, which is ironic as fuck. Because we've created this. But if I go into a forest and just walk around, I feel great. There's no stimulus that's putting me on weird.
Well, like compared to going to a zoo, you know.
Yeah, or like walk around in the city and like see how there's just so much going on that it's like you're trying to keep track of it all and you just can't. So you just focus on very particular things. And I think that's very wired into our evolutionary trait to like, we want to know what's going on in our environment. Everybody has a bubble around them, and what goes on in that bubble likes to be understood and accepted by us. And it's like, the space of that bubble will like expand or contract based on the amount of stimulus. So if you're out in the forest or by yourself in an open space, like just by yourself, you know, or maybe with a couple other people or whatever, that becomes your space. And it expands as much as you can see around you and have control over, kind of thing. If you're in this city on a train, your bubble is like very, very small because you can't control anything outside your bubble, so you just bin it. You just, I don't even want to think about it. I'm looking at my phone. Like, I have control over this tiny box. I'm gonna focus on that. Oh, that guy had a weird look. He's looking at me funny.
Well, you know, maybe that's something we need to practice to have the capacity to increase our bubble in these public spaces that do feel, you know, I mean, our friend Maddie, you know, who's upstairs now, probably doing all kinds of crazy things. I've been on the train with him once, and he was just chatting with everyone. It was a Saturday afternoon. People were going to the footy. He is from Sydney, so he doesn't even really know anything about AFL, and he was just like teasing people, saying, "Oh, go Bombers! No, go Hawks!" to this person, and actually just changed the whole vibe.
Feel the carriage.
The whole carriage. Everyone was kind of like, you know, opening themselves up and not looking down at their phone, and people were like asking, you know, talking,
sharing
to each other
the same space.
And like, you get on a train, usually like, yeah, you don't make eye contact with anyone. Yeah. But like, we had a conversation with at least 3 or 4 groups of people, so it was quite nice.
Absolutely, and it's people are often quite willing to do that without being aware of it. Like, something I find really funny is the impact of social media on like social norms or social what expected behavior is, and you know, how to meet people and stuff. It's like, today it's almost taboo to meet somebody outside of Facebook or Tinder or dating apps. Like, you're not allowed to just walk up on somebody on the train and be like, "Hey man, what's up?" And like, Facebook's got that like people you may know like suggestion, and it's like, sometimes I read that as like an angry girlfriend, like, here are some people that you may know. If they're outside of this, you're not allowed. Like, Facebook actually to me is quite a bit of like a, you know, pretty pokey proddy girlfriend. Like, it's your friend's birthday. Would you like to wish them a happy birthday? Like, what's on your mind today, Will? How are you feeling? Like, oh, here are some friends that you're allowed to talk to.
And it remembers everything you've ever said.
Oh yeah, down to the date. Can bring it up. Like, here's what you said on this day last year. Like, it's I'm like, everybody wants a girlfriend, right? Or a partner. Like, that's why everybody's got Facebook. It's just like, everybody's so attached to it in such a deep relationship. It's a bit hard to juggle. It's like, my girlfriend's my side missus these days, you know? Yeah, when you can, my favorite, just on that, the idea of sharing space, it's one of my favorite words, and it's gone out of use, but it used to be in Old English. It's called a snuggery. And the snuggery is the size of the space that you and your crew have, that bubble that you're sharing. And so if you're at a pub and you got your back little like corner, and that's your spot, and like, that's where the conversation, that's your snuggery. Whoa. And it's a room that's as big or as small as it needs to be. Like, if I go out into the middle of the field and we sit down, that whole field's our snuggery.
Wow.
You know? I just really like that.
Well, that ties into your experience at Esoteric. You had a snuggery the size of a festival.
Yes. The entire festival became my space to just play with people.
Can we give some people who don't know some context on who Will the Wizard is and what the Temple of Shangri-La was? And what was the group of wizards called?
The High Council of Shangri-La.
The High Council of Shangri-La.
So I'll go through from the beginning. And
so you've been inhabiting the character of Will the Wizard. Most people who know you will know you partly as Will the Wizard. When did you step into that character? When did that become part of who you are?
So this
Before
is gonna
answer that, would you like some chocolate?
Absolutely.
Vegan chocolate.
Perfect. So you don't need milk. Thank you very much.
You need milk with a Y.
Way more trendy.
There's more here.
Cheers, man. So it's cool that you asked me this question at this particular time, because before I broke my leg, actually no, it was just before I broke my leg, was when I started getting to festivals, and like in a contribution kind of way, because I used to go as a punter a lot and just enjoy them, but then I had this kind of idea and was just like, I fucking love these things, you know, why don't I go to them all the time? And so I started getting in for free and just helping people out. And there's a concept of like a doof name, which is just a name that you use in your, like, I guess, party circles where you're meeting people constantly so they can remember you. And met this guy named Jamie the Giraffe who was very tall and had blonde hair, and it just stuck. And so we're trying to think of something for Will, and like Will the Wombat, like, nah, they're pretty chubby. Like, I'm a pretty thin guy, like pretty athletic. Like Will the Walrus, fuck. Will the Whale. Why are all the W animals overweight? I'm feeling a bit jibbed here. And we ended up settling on Aardvark, just because what I was wearing, I kind of looked a bit like an armadillo or something. Mm-hmm. And then a friend of mine, a volunteer coordinator, was just like, Will the Wizard, duh, you're the most magical fucker I've ever met. And so I just kind of stuck from there, and then I got into performing not long after, and decided to make that my kind of character. And have always been a little bit of a wizard and a little bit magical, and it was nice to have other people recognize that and then throw that at me, and then to be able to grow into this kind of like persona has been really, really wonderful. But it's the idea of the High Council of Shangri-La and the performance that we threw at Esoteric, that sort of began with this idea I had of like the people who inspire me the most. Like I just had this idea of like my High Council of Wizards. You know, like to me a wizard is somebody who can understand or see the invisible movements of the world. Like the strings that tie shit together in the background, that's just a bit, and then can manipulate them, and can like change the fabric of the world in very subtle but like undeniable ways. And like everybody is a wizard in their own way, but some of the people I've met have just been like awe-inspiring, you know. And it was this idea that if I get like 5 or 6 of these people together, we just hang out for a night, and because I met them in fucking all over the world in different places and stuff, and it was like, how cool would it be to have like those 5 people just together, like give us any task, like solve global hunger, like we just leave, like a couple of weeks later somehow just some weird shit happens and fucking global hunger would finish. And I just had this idea of like, I want to gather this crew, and just thought like how much like joy could we put out there. And then decided to apply for a festival that a friend of mine was the performance coordinator of. He actually messaged me because I fire eat and plate spin and do some individual solo performing under Will the Wizard. He sent me a message saying like, hey dude, like send in your application. We're doing the thing soon. Like I really want you to be here. And so I kind of took this idea of the High Council of Wizards and went, well, I want to get my friends in for free too. I'm just gonna tell them we're performing as a group. I came up with a little script for like a story I wrote into it, and then basically came up with like an adventure style game set in a festival. So different characters wandering around who are playing a very mystical or magical kind of persona, and they'll bring people in and then give them a task to complete, like a quest, and everything's dressed and just coated and slathered in love, just love, art, and creativity. And we had people, galloping all over this festival trying to like complete the menial but engaging tasks that these wizards were giving them. And the whole thing was so much fun. It was so much. We had hidden treasure. There's a treasure chest with like a secret code and like a secret temple that you only got once you like found all of the wizards and helped them all out. And you got it inducted into the revolution. It was pretty awesome and it came off really well. So now I've basically been getting into games writing, more or less, like a fun version of the Hunger Games. I'm the game writer. I'm trying to get everybody to have as much fun as possible. And everybody should leave alive. That's how I'm pitching it. It's like the Hunger Games, but fun. With a fair bit of like Lord of the Rings shit in there or something.
So what was that storyline?
So I'm trying to parody a little bit the political movements of the world right now, and we're moving into like a technological age where there's a lot of desire to control people and one another, and like I feel our personal freedoms are being reduced more and more, and that is something that comes with living in a complicated society. Is you've got to put more rules on everybody to cater for those who don't understand why they shouldn't do something, But I pretty strongly reject that. I think that all people should be free to live as they feel they should live. And ultimately, I believe that people can do that in harmony without being told how. I feel like before there were lawyers, it probably wasn't much crime. like before there was banks, like people probably just had enough money, like before there was butchers, you just go out into the field and like if you could find meat, you could eat it. Like I think we overcomplicate things a little bit, and so the idea of this plot line was that there is a galactic government that is trying to introduce a tax on human emotions. And so if you experience an emotion without, like if you smile without a permit, that might cost you a 5-point tax, like demerit points or whatever. And if you feel like you're against that principle and that idea, then you should join the revolution. But we gotta test you first. We gotta make sure that your character stands up. And so if you can just do a couple of favors for us, we'll initiate you. And one of the biggest things of joy that this gave me was going to another festival several months later and seeing so many people who had completed this or been participated were all still wearing their wristbands. And there was this real like cool little like bro fisting kind of happening like across rooms. People would just see it, notice, and be like, "Oh, you're part of the revolution." Yeah, man. I actually had an idea to try and write a scripted actual revolution into a festival, but it will take me a bit of fleshing out.
Well, last time we were together, you were talking about the pots and pans revolution and how that's inspired you recently.
Absolutely. So the Icelandic pots and pans revolution, if you guys haven't heard about it, definitely spend 2 minutes on Google. And if you're into social change, it'll be something that will give you a lot of excitement. And basically, there's some corrupt stuff that happened, and some journalists found out about it, told everybody, and people actually got upset. And yeah, I would so like that to happen here. I mean, people get kind of mad, but they don't do anything about it. And like, it's so crazy to me how deep the belief in certain ideas have become. Like to me, there are two kinds of truths. There is the kind that science is going for, like that objective, undeniable, like this is the way things are. And then there's the way that you perceive things, which is that second kind of truth. And like I'm after trying to find things that are just undeniably real, if possible. And so, like, the belief that people have in things is almost like they hold them to be true because they believe in them so strongly, but really it's only as true as you believe it. Like, money is literally only worth the belief that people have in money. It's a piece of paper that means nothing. Can't do anything for you except maybe act as a makeshift straw under certain circumstances. It's about all the use I've ever gotten out of money. Like, it's kind of pretty to look at. The Australian notes are anyway, like, cool colours. But, like, you know, if I didn't believe the money was valuable, if somebody said to me, like, hey mate, you want to come over and build my deck? I'll give you a couple of pieces of paper. Tell them to fuck themselves. You know, but it's like such a true belief that it's like, to think of it in almost any other way is like incomprehensible. And so like, I think that people have this belief that politics is inherently corrupt, and this is the same way that we deal with money. We just accept it and nobody ever questions it. So in Iceland they got real upset about it, and just, I don't know who it was. If anybody ever can find out who it is and get back to me and tell me who the first person was to go outside and start smacking their pots and pans together, that person is a goddamn hero, and their name needs to be like, they need to be on posters everywhere. But somebody did that, walked outside, smashed some pots and pans. Other people went, what are you making noise about? And they said, this is what's happening, I'm fucking mad. People went, well, me too, let me grab my pots and pans. And enough people did this, they stormed the steps and they overthrew their government without firing a single bullet, and totally revamped their style of government, and they came out of the 2008 financial crisis better than any other country in the world because of the way that they dealt with this. And really all it takes is a little bit of indignancy and a bit of action in this particular case, you know. So what I'm thinking about doing is trying to introduce a blatant wrong at a festival, like a control system, like a series of people who are there to be the antagonists, you know, and to just have people fucking deal with it and just come in and interrupt the fucking music every now and then and like make people pick up rubbish and shit. Like, I don't know, just try and make it
Picking
like...
up rubbish is a good thing.
That's what's hard about it. How do you
like
make a playful bad guy at a festival that's not actually going to ruin people's time?
Maybe someone who takes his taxes on your food.
I think I'm just going to make like a super evil dude and just make like the Captain Chaos and have him as like the guy who just rocks up at a stage and fucks everyone's shit up and then demands some stuff, and people just have to do it because he's in charge.
You got anyone in mind for the character?
Oh, I'm
It's
sure
a
it's
difficult role to play.
I can actually, like, there's a few people who come to mind in different ways, but I feel Tom
Tom
could
Busby.
do a great job. Yeah, for some reason I just think his there's a regalness to him, like a certain like honestness in the way that he could order people around. I feel like they would actually listen.
But I feel like there has to be a hint of malevolence in whatever figure you're trying to overthrow. And
that's
Tom
where
Busby,
he's got to act.
Yeah,
you know? He's gotta he can bring that into it, but he definitely has that, you know, that pride and that also a little bit of, you know, tricksterness, a little bit of like evil. I think is definitely. Anyway, if I can write in some kind of revolution and get people on a series of quests given out to them by wizards kind of thing that all culminates with 50 odd people with pots and pans marching on some, getting ready to fuck shit up. Like, I don't know, it's my dream to start it there, and then in a couple of months or something, a couple of years, whatever, next time politicians do something really gross, I'll just get an extra slice of satisfaction, you know?
Well, also last time we were together, you were talking about New Zealand's legal resident wizard.
Oh, yes.
Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So, so much of what people say is lost in how they say it. I think you could take, you know, the most, like, true... I think often people need something to shock them into listening, put it that way. And so if there's a politician dressed up as a wizard spouting stuff at you that's actually pretty switched on and well thought through, then the contrast of those two ideas, the frivolity of somebody dressing as a wizard while speaking honestly and passionately about like making social change, is something I find super interesting. And like, I think it would be a lot more effective in politics. It would be more entertaining. Like the way Trump kind of did his whole thing in America was he basically turned politics into reality TV. and people watch reality TV, whereas not many people like to watch politics. And just because it's framed in such a boring way, you know, you think of it as like guys in suits talking about shit and just arguing over what's right and wrong, like including like what's right and wrong inside like a woman's womb. Which to me is not really their place to do that. But you know, it just seems like old white guys talking about shit, which is not exciting. But politics is also like Game of Thrones. You know, like that's politics. That's essentially what's happening. It's the backdrop to which ideas fight. So that's how I think about it. It's like you've got different ideas and there's a ring and they're duking it out. And the strongest ideas should win, but it's not how things work. It's the ideas that come from the person who's best at throwing them out kind of tend to win. But I think we need to kind of make politics more interesting, just because it's something that is reliant on, like democracy. If you're going to put the hands of the power in the people, then you need the people to be responsible for that.
Okay, just wind back to the wizard for a second. You didn't explain who the...
Okay, so there is a wizard who's a politician in New Zealand. He's the official wizard of New Zealand, and he has a political party that pushes for various ideals that line up with his I guess, ethos. And he's actually the official and national wizard of New Zealand. He's been like more or less knighted by their government as their wizard. He walks around in a cloak. He went to war with the government over them painting telephone boxes a particular color. He started an army, and people joined it. And
so that's what you're planning to do at this next festival: start a revolution, acquire an army.
Absolutely, I would love to do that. Although I feel like the wizard thing, you know, it's people powered, and so if I can get enough people to believe in me, maybe I can do it like that. My fallback is just being the naked politician. I feel like maybe if I just get up there and just like, I'm not sure how naked I'm allowed to be in public, so I'm thinking if I get Speedos with a dick printed on them, and then do my speeches like that. Yeah, but the shit he was saying was fucking stupid.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think there's a way that if you can shock people into paying attention, and then what you're saying holds any merit of truth to it. I think people just need to make shit more interesting. Like Tony Abbott is not interesting to me, and so I actively try and avoid everything he says because he's fucking poison. So I would like to be able to believe in social change and like. Because like politics are the people driving the social change of society, right? So you want to believe in that. You want to have faith in it. You want to think that you're in good hands. But there's no faith in that system at all.
It feels more like politics and politicians in general putting the brakes on social change. It's the people who are actually trying to make social change, and the government deciding, do we want this change? Should we allow this change?
Yeah.
Like they're kind of like the...
I think you're spot on with that. And it ties into like the joke we were having earlier today about like, you know, a purge. Like if you take that idea of the purge, like the movie.
Reference, by the way.
Yeah, Rick and Morty, there's also movies about it, but like one day where there's no laws, everything is legal, right down to murder, you know, like, and all of society just gets one day to behave however the fuck they want. And like, I think inherently humans are quite good, and I think people would use that day to like, you know, build shit without permits and like put a greenhouse up in their neighbor's backyard and
plant a veggie garden on the nature strip.
Go speeding because fuck it, you know. Drive on that highway that's got all those cameras as fast as you can. See if you can clock 300 on one of those speed cameras. I don't know, be safe, but like I think something that gave me a lot of solace as an idea, as a concept recently was this idea that humans are always trying to change things. You know, we're trying to change our environment and master it, I guess. And the idea that we need to change anything at all, that things aren't already good enough, like it's kind of setting a standard, and our standard is to drive towards change. And most people recognize or believe in the existence of evil, or acts that are inherently wrong. Now, if like a lion eats, takes over a new pride and it eats all of the old babies in that pride, that's not evil for a lion. They have no conscience about that, you know? Humans, there are certain things that almost every human would recognize as wrong and as an immoral or unkind or evil act. And the fact that we even can conceive of that, and then everybody's actively trying to not fall short of that. Like, when you fuck up, you know you fucked up. And like, that's something that makes me happy, is that we're inbuilt to recognize that we should achieve a certain level. And if we fall short of that, that's what we deem as crappy. But the fact that we have a bar at all is something to feel good about. Because if we didn't, then, you know, what would society be like if nobody could think of something as wrong? Like, chances are there'd just be a lot more weird shit going on. It'd be a bit harder to work out where we fit in it all.
More chocolate?
Yeah. That sounds good.
How long have we been going for?
Yeah, we got some
been flying by.
Good chats.
Wow, we just crossed an hour.
Nice.
Who would have thought?
I hope there's upon re-listening, it'll be an hour worth listening to.
I hope so.
Some interesting, ways of phrasing some pretty solid concepts. I think like a lot of human condition comes down to language, and
maybe just try to get behind the mic a little bit more.
Yeah.
Or just,
Yeah, for sure. Just the arms a bit, uncomfortable, so I keep shifting my body in different ways to
you can move the
balance
stand
it.
a little bit. If it
Yeah, that might be the way to go.
that?
Perfect.
Oh. There you go.
Just lift the condenser a little. Cheers.
Sweet. Yep. We're having some technical difficulties here. There we go.
But yeah, it was a thing that I was chatting to my dad recently about. Something that separates humans from other animals is that so other species' methods of communication don't last longer than their own lives. So like, if a dog is trying to speak to another dog, then it will like pee on a tree, and then the other dog, that's like it's scrawling a note essentially. But the other dog come along, get information from that, like learn a little bit, and then, they move on. The smell will fade. Humans can essentially pee on a tree in a way that lasts forever. Like, I have, through reading, understood and heard the thoughts of people who died thousands of years ago. Almost everybody in the Western world knows who Shakespeare was. I don't think there are many dogs who have a Shakespearean idol, you can't pass information on unless it's within your own body. Like, genetically, you make, changes you adapt to the environment around you, and then you pass that on genetically. We're the first animals to ever break outside of that way of communication, and we can communicate with each other in ways that last longer than our own selves. Right, and because of that, it allows us to build on a much broader base of knowledge, because now everything's not just like generational passing on of information. It becomes multi-generational. Like, instead of just learning from one generation of parents, we're now learning from their parents as well, and beyond them. It's building and faster. And so I think this is where the problem comes in as well for people, is that we put so much belief in words, whereas words inherently mean different things to different people. And it's our experiences that we've grown up going through which define the meaning of things for us. And so everybody has different experiences, so it's literally impossible for two people to see the same thing, but we pretend we are. And I think that causes a lot of the conflict and problems that people have between each other, at the same time as creating a lot of the joy, because when you manage to vibe on that same page and you get beyond, when you pick up the meaning that somebody else is putting down, it's such a fun thing to do. But at the same time, knowing that nobody else can truly understand you is a very intimidating thing for a lot of people, that you're alone in the way that you perceive the world, and that nobody else before or after you will ever perceive the world in the same way. Like, you got to carry that. Like, you got to rep yourself. I think that's an intimidating thought for a lot of people, but pretty cool too.
You getting hungry?
Yeah.
It's getting
Sounds
pretty
good.
cold down here as well.
Shall we wrap it up?
I'd like to ask you one more question.
Absolutely, hit me.
Finish off maybe on one more tangent.
Yeah.
Is there anything you've changed your mind on recently?
Changed my mind on
some new idea or some new way of viewing something you held a belief on.
Well, I'm
Anything
always trying to fact check myself. It's just something that I've tried to do for a long time, is to make sure that if I am going to adopt something as a belief, that it fits in line with all the rest of my beliefs. Because I like things to be consistent in myself. So I will occasionally learn something new and then go back and edit something, or like just rejig a file a little bit and tweak it so it fits in with everything else a little bit more smoothly. But as far as something I've changed my mind about, the reason I explain that is because I'm constantly making little changes about things, like constantly improving. But if there's any like 180s or like differences or backflips of opinion, Colby Covington. After watching his last fight, I like him now.
Yeah.
Before that, I just thought he was a bit of a douche, and he is, but now he's a likable douche. So that's one thing. Pretty small. But
I have to watch that fight.
He backed it up.
Yeah.
All the shit he was talking, he backed it up. And if you're brave enough to talk that much shit, but then you got the ability to actually to follow through with it, that's something I respect. It's it takes a bit of balls to do that, especially when like he's doing it for the promotion. Like I don't believe that he is the person he's trying to portray himself as. I think he's a pretty nice guy, and like you can kind of tell in the way that people, like anybody who I think knows him, they kind of like joke about it, like they kind of can see that they're like, well,
it's just all part of the facade of the sport.
Absolutely.
I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast with George St. Pierre, and he was talking about his last fight with Michael Bisping, and about how Bisping was talking all this shit, trying to rev him up and everything, but there was a few times where they interacted one-on-one behind the cameras, and it was just all good. They were in the bathroom taking a piss next to each other, and there was a TMZ camera in there, and Bisping was just like, fuck off, whatever, and he was just like, said something to George, just like something friendly or whatever. But it was really funny. He was talking about how he knows, at the end of the day, him and Bisping, it's just business and they're friends. But he was like, with the Diaz brothers, I just don't know, man. Like, they're just crazy. I don't know if the guy really hates me or if he's just trying to sell tickets.
Well, they're thugs. They're like straight up thugs.
Straight
I
up.
think so. It's cool. Like I grew up around a couple of people like that, and I like the way they've kind of kept that. Like these are fighters, and they're like, you can tell they had a bit of a hard life, hard upbringing, and they don't really hide that.
Well, there's it seems to be two kind of UFC athletes. There are fighters who turned into athletes, and there are athletes who turn into fighters. And the Diaz brothers are definitely from the fighters who turn into athetes.
Man, like straight up, like they
look at some of the other guys like Tyron Woodley, even like Yoel Romero. Maybe he's a bit more, but these people who are just like built for sport, built for
Rampage Jackson, I think, said that as well. He's like, he doesn't actually like fighting. He's just a crazy athlete. He's just good at it, you know? And it's like, I think that's what I'd be like. Like, it's not in my inherent like desire to want to fight kind of thing. Like, there is a pleasure in it. There is like a joy and a crazy kind of like adrenaline, like seat of your pants flying on the edge kind of thing. But it's like, I don't like seeing other people in pain, you know? So that makes it a little bit of a contradiction. Whereas some people, like, they enjoy that, man. One of the scariest people I ever met was somebody who was super fucking clever, really, really smart, and very down to earth and very grounded, but he was a cage fighter and he just loved hurting people. It's like, why do you do this, man? He's like, 'cause I like it. Like, I was like, what? We had a crazy chat like this for like 45 minutes. Now I find out that you enjoy just hurting people. Like,
well, better doing it in a ring or a cage and getting paid than doing it, at a bar or a nightclub and going to jail. Absolutely,
and doing it in a like, so much of anything, I think, is the grace with which you do it, the method, the like the style that you've got. Like, you can punch somebody up in a ring, and that's a style that you're going through the same kind of process where, like, whoever's watching it is benefiting. You know, like it's a productive thing, whereas it's essentially the same as like in the act of it, like getting into a fight at a pub and smacking somebody up in a car park and sending them to hospital or whatever. There's no benefit from that, or not much. Pride, ego. Yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's something I find super interesting about any elite sport is that you need that ego. Like, I don't know if you've spent much time in and around like high level athletes, but like when I was getting paid to play soccer, almost everybody there was something in them that put a whole lot of their own personal views of themselves into their performance. And that was how you kind of like move in that world, like who you are is how good you are at what you do. And it's very like Robert Whittaker is one of the few fighters I've seen who doesn't have that mindset where he is who he is and he fights. And it's like one of the few elite athletes, like that motivation is what drives you to put that time in to get as good as you need to be. And if you don't have like your character, I guess, riding on the outcome of your training sessions, then you don't train as hard. And so it's most of the people who end up in those worlds are the people who are super egotistical and really fucking driven. And like I've kind of grown to see that as a bad thing after kind of getting more in touch with the whole spiritual nature of the world and everything. And but they both have their place. Like I think ego is the thing that get people to get up out of bed in the morning and go to work and do shit like that. It's very important in a lot of ways. But at the same time, it's very detrimental.
False goals.
Yeah, it can do.
Goals a lot of the time.
Yeah. And it's also like, it's so when I broke my leg, I learned that there's a pretty consistent level of energy, and it's just about the outlet of that and how you find ways to channel it. And I went from running a good, probably 50, 60 Ks a week, just kicking balls and stuff, to having to find a way of getting all of that energy out without being able to move. And so that was when a lot of like it just went into thinking, and I would just think myself like fucking tired. I'd be so exhausted from thinking. It's the equivalent of me going out for a run for like 2 hours and coming back and just being like, whoa, my brain is exhausted right now. Like, but that like it's using that energy in the right way. And so I think ego can, it's a recognition that we have this energy and then we need to spend it, and then we don't put much thought into how we're spending it. And so a lot of jobs these days, I think, are based off this idea. Like one person can come up with a breakthrough that can equal the productivity of millions. Like the people who work in, say, the guys who invented computers have done more for the human race than all of the shelf stackers in the history of the world combined. And there's probably been a lot more shelf stackers kind of thing. So it's like this idea that everybody needs to be doing something all the time, I think is quite redundant when there are people who can cover everybody pretty clearly. Like, we used to live in a world where jobs were necessary because we didn't have the technology to get enough shit done. So we had to spread it all out between everybody. So everybody like got everything done and we could all be comfortable. Now, I think the world has changed a little bit, Like, they've got robots that cook you pizza now. Like, there's a lot less shit for people to do, but we're still trying to come up with everybody should have a job all the time. And so it's like, all right, well, you go manage that guy. And then you can manage the guy who's managing that guy, and then we'll get another manager for him, right? That's 5 jobs.
And one
done.
manager for you as well.
Yeah. So we got one thing that's being done, but we're covering 5 people. Sweet. If we do this in every industry, we can sort it out. And so people are just...
solve unemployment.
They're jacking off into the wind, pretending they're important, And it's creating all these problems for everybody else. And I think if we just acknowledge the fact that it's like, hey, like... we can set it up in a way that we can split the energy between us that we're spending it and channeling it in a productive manner. And then the rest of it should all just be ours to do whatever the fuck we want with, you know? I think it's a bit unfair right now that you've got some people who are living their lives, like making their livelihood, making their income off the fact that they own land. Like they're not actually doing anything for anyone. Like perhaps their granddad or something, you know, worked really hard and helped a bunch of people out. An economy at the end of the day is just you're getting people to help each other. Like you can do more if people help each other. So how do you encourage that? And like the current way of thinking is like, well, if we get people to promise to do shit for each other, then they'll do more shit. And so right now there's more debt in the economy than there is money. There's more promises that have been made between people like, hey, if you do this for me, well, I promise I'll hook you up later, man. But we've got a system where the people who are facilitating this system, like the referees of this game, are also playing. They're just making the rules while still in the game at the same time. So the game's getting harder and harder for everybody who's not a referee. And we're having to do more and more work to cover these guys who are just like, you know, like taking a cut of everything. And like there have been so many promises made now that it's like there's more promises made than actual like concrete worth. Like if I give you money, that's a symbol of the work that you've done. You know, it's you've given me a gesture of your energy and time. And this is something that I want to give, so you can buy yourself more time and energy. You know, you can trade it with somebody else. That's the idea of it. And so, like, people running the economy, the bankers, economists, government, play a big part in that. It's essentially like, all right, how do we get people to do shit for each other so we don't have to do anything, and we can ride kind of on the coattails and just enjoy it. And yeah, I don't know. We need to reset. Jenga tower's getting real tall. We gotta fill up some of those gaps, guys. Knock a few blocks off the top and we'll just fix them in the bottom, shore up those foundations, and then we'll see how high we can get. Yeah. Should we wrap it up?
I reckon we should wrap it up.
Absolutely.
It's getting a bit cold down here.
It's been a pleasure, Pesche.
It's plenty of love, plenty of warmness, but it's gets pretty cold.
Yeah, as far as actual temperature.
But wow, a good 75 minutes of epic conversation. That
Fantastic.
was so much fun.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. It always is to chat, and I look forward to hopefully doing it again one day.
Well, if you come up to Byron, we can record a round 2 up there.
Oh, let's do it. And just for anybody listening at the moment, this is in a very beautiful, more or less like basement of a house, and it's fantastic. But if we're up in Byron, shall we see if we can find a bit of a natural space, and then see if that has any influence on the conversation. Kind of look back and compare the pair, and just see if a natural environment like influences the flow.
We might have a bit more of an optimistic outlook if we're outside under the blue sky. Instead of under fluorescent lights where it's about 8 degrees.
Surrounded by bricks.
And the smell of damp concrete and a dirty laundry next door.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's, basements can be great. But they're still basements.
Yeah. But so can beaches and blue skies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, we've said we'll wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. Thank you for listening. Much love to everyone. Peace.
Thank you very much, Will the Wizard and Pesche.
Woohoo.